Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen here with Louis D'Souza, and this is your Daily Dose of Happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today, and as I try to turn off the sound over on the other computer so we don't get all confused here, I just wanted to say we've got a couple of pieces of news that we're going to be passing your way. First is that the Stream of David Strickle, is going to be moving on and doing some other stuff. He'll be back occasionally to do a guest appearance and so forth, but we will be getting a new co-host on Tuesday. His name is Dean McMurray. He goes by the handle The Military Medium, and he has been on the show a few times, and so he's going to become a regular. And he's a good guy, Louis. His head's on straight. He's got really grounded responses and reactions to situations, and maybe the military background does that. I don't know, but really interesting guy. And so looking forward to getting him on here on a regular basis. And we're also going to have a special guest to join him on his first day, which will be next Tuesday. David Strickle is going to finish the show tomorrow. So tomorrow will be the last chance for those of you who want to send in a question for the stream to answer. That will be the show for that. But the following week, Dean will be joining us, and we'll have a special guest. She goes by the name of Serenity Sam, and a fascinating person. She's got quite the background, has done a lot of what some people call shadow work on herself. Lots of dealings with what's the phrase they use? Oh, the dark night of the souls, and interesting perspectives there. So we're going to get to know her a little bit. So Amy Blackford has a family thing going on. She's got an important visit from a close loved one that's happening today. So she will be back next week. And Louis, that means it's just you and me today. Think we can handle it? I mean,
no. Amy, come on. No. We'll survive.
We've done it before. No big deal. But we did get an email a couple of weeks ago. And this was actually part of, I guess you might call it a series of emails or a thread. He or she, we're not really sure. We're trying to figure out. But Chris was the person who wrote in, and Chris had responded to a show that we had done. I think it was in late October, early November. And Chris listened to us on PRN in New York, and wasn't really familiar with the show, but responded to something, and we wrote back and so forth. And Chris followed up again with a rather lengthy response to that email, to that last email about 2 weeks ago. And I thought I'd share it here because, first of all, I promised Chris that we would be bringing it up here on the Monday show, because I figured it'd be a great topic for you to address, Louis. And secondly, there's a lot of interesting stuff in here that we can bring up. So let me read the email to you. It says, "Thanks for doing what you do. You seem like a great guy, so thought I'd share a couple of insights for your information regarding your worthy plan of public speaking to young adults. No response necessary. You must get a ton of mail. I was touched that you took the time to write, and I'm doing fine." And then he or she, Chris, I forget if we're not getting the gender right, but that's just me. "As a science writer," Chris writes, "I've learned some unfortunate facts that relate to today's young adults. Toxic exposures incurred during development in utero and childhood have more profound effects than the same exposures incurred during adulthood. Young people today were born into a more toxic environment than we were. In particular, children born during the 1990s received excessive exposure to mercury in their vaccines. This can be expected to convey lifelong susceptibility to anxiety, depression, and other neurological issues." And then parenthetically, Chris writes, "This is documented in the scientific literature, but is not openly acknowledged by our health authorities." When I hear people like Jonathan Haidt complain about how today's college students need too much coddling, I feel angry at his presumptions. This article by my colleague, Janet Kern, explains how vaccine mercury affects the developing brain. I think that young people who are stressed by their toxic exposures as well as by modern life could benefit from the stress-reducing aspects of LOA, learning to imagine a positive outcome and to discern and act on one's preferences, which may include staying out of the fast lane. Going on, Chris writes, "Indirectly related to your field is the parasympathetic polyvagal theory, e.g. Stephen Porges, I'm not sure what the pronunciation of Stephen's name is. In today's world, our nervous systems are often in sympathetic mode, flight or fight, rather than parasympathetic, rest and digest, the latter of which is important for health. One way we boost our parasympathetic polyvagal mode is to co-regulate, to socialize with others with whom we feel safe based on our neuroception, subconscious perception of the other's body language, eye contact, vocal tone, etc. This important means of nervous system regulation is unfortunately precluded by shutdowns, masking, sheltering, and isolating. Going on, Chris writes, as someone who is slightly on the autism spectrum, I often don't understand things that are obvious to others. I usually need things to be spelled out. LOA, Chris writes parenthetically, seems to be a way of making explicit things that some people, not me, seem to know instinctively. When I was going to Weight Watchers years ago, I found it quite challenging and stressful. You're supposed to record your intake and exercise and stay within your assigned point count. I completely missed the idea that rather than being an end in itself, this point system was simply a means to improve focus and awareness. It was not mandatory to stay within your assigned point count. It was just information to help you judge what effect a particular level of intake and exercise would have on the scale. Awareness doesn't need to be stressful. LOA need not involve adding tasks to one busy to-do list. It mainly just involves envisioning positive outcomes and discerning visceral preferences, which doesn't take time and actually frees time by precluding overanalysis. Not that I know much about LOA, this is just my take. So quite a few thoughts there from Chris. And I don't really know where you want to begin, Louis, but I was fascinated overall by 2 points. First, that Chris has apparently done quite a bit of research and has made himself or herself quite knowledgeable about some of the lesser known research. Secondly, I was also interested that Chris was focusing on the nervous system and particularly referencing, was it the parasympathetic polyvagal side of the nervous system? And I honestly have little or no information in my own background about that, so I can't address it. I just thought it was interesting Chris brought that up. So those are my initial impressions. But what do you think? What do you think about Chris what he or she had to say?
Yeah, there's so much there. So let's just address bits and pieces that I remember.
Okay.
First of all, getting annoyed about anybody who's got any idea of whatever they're thinking or whatever they're believing is of no real value. So you will hear many people having many different viewpoints along the way, and my advice would be to let them have them and just be clear what you believe. So that would be a very important factor in my life. So if somebody was really running on about vaccines or anything, or the kids being too mollycoddled in this day and age, I would say, fantastic, you can have your viewpoint, but I know that because of my background and my experiences, I've become incredibly resilient. So, and I believe that almost anybody can become very resilient. And they also talk about LOA easing a lot of the stresses that are in today's world, etc. And I completely agree with that. I haven't seen anything out there, well, nothing that I've seen is as effective once you have grasped the philosophy and started to live it, because it's so integral in your life, it's so basic, it's so primal, that if you understand it and work with it, it truly eases a lot of the mental tension. As I've mentioned many times, it's one of the biggest things LOA's done for me, is pretty much take away 90%, if not more, of my mental stresses and strains. So yeah, I mean, it's hugely advantageous. And also they talked a lot about needing things spelled out because of autistic individuals may need more explaining of how things actually work, and the way LOA has done it and maybe our program, etc., has been very beneficial. And I understand that concept fully, because we really do, over how many years now, go over these similar concepts again and again from different angles and different ways, so that people can grasp them clearer and clearer and clearer. And it's hugely advantageous, I think, to grasp it and to see it from many different angles. That's what I loved about Abraham Hicks. You know, Abraham Hicks took many different people with different problems and used the same solution with the different problems and came to a very good place with pretty much anybody who sat in the chair. And that really leaves you relatively impressed with anybody who can take individuals, no matter what their problem, take pretty much the same solution and massage it into their lives and help them find it easier. So yeah, I like the idea of fight and flight versus, can't remember the other two, but reset and I don't know what was it, recover or something. But I really appreciate that kind of concept, because when you think of fight and flight, you generally only think in that scenario, and fight and flight is really just pouring water on the fire all the time and not getting to a place where there's no fire, where you can just sit back and relax and rest. And of course, that's where meditation
Rest and digest was the other one, by the way.
Mind comes in. Rest and?
Rest and digest was the other word.
And digest, yes.
Yeah.
So I would even take it a step further and say you really want to get to a stiller place. So you're not even digesting anymore, but you really want to slow everything down to a degree that torturous thoughts aren't even there anymore. And yeah, Abraham said it's easier to teach somebody to still the mind than it is to teach them to focus on positive things. I know you might have a slightly different view on that, but it really does appeal to me largely, very, very hugely, from all the people I've learned and worked with, etc. Stilling the mind is very, very, very beneficial in the beginning. And I think after that, I think you get to the place where you have so many positive thoughts and you're working with them so actively that it's a very easy place to be, where you and I are, I think. I don't want to speak for you, but
well, I think you're pretty much on track. What you're saying is essentially accurate. The only thing I would perhaps modify is I just try to avoid the use of the word positive or negative, just because there's often there's baggage that's attached to those words that I like to try to avoid. So I like, prefer or don't prefer, like or don't like. But other than that, I agree completely with what you said. I mean, we have no disagreement there.
I mean, life is very much about this vibrational interpreting machine getting input all the time. So you're sitting there and, you've got the car moving, you've got different cars, you've got people talking, you've got people discussing things, you've got all of that. And that's just input coming in. Now, what happens is humans sit there afterwards and we take this input, which has come in, and we label that's good, that's bad, that's good, that's bad. So we've got all these labels which we take, and the input, once it come in, is actually completely neutral. It's completely, absolutely neutral until we give it the label good or bad. And it's another way of looking at or showing people to look at what is happening in their life. There is no judgment initially when everything comes in. The judgment comes afterwards, where you take your mind and you say, this is good, tick, this is bad, tick. And we're sitting there with all these judgments, and then that is what often tortures us, because we're doing that. So if you get to the place that you are not judging anything, you are simply letting it come in, and you're seeing the world as it is without any judgment, that is kind of the place where I'm starting to see myself largely at the moment. Is very frustrating for people, because they want to get under your skin, or they want to confront you or something, and you say, well, I agree with what you're saying, it's okay, you can have that a point of view, it's no problem. And it gets very aggravating for some people but as I say, because of my vibration, I don't even attract those individuals anymore. So I very rarely get challenged on any level, because it's not really my desire. I don't need to be challenged.
So even when you go out of your way to go to the speaker's corner. I said, even when you go out of your way to go to the speaker's corner,
what I do is I find a way of agreeing with them so that I can add more different concepts, ideas, so that they can kind of work with them. Because if I'm argumentative with them, they're going to shut down. The walls are going to close down, and the information that I'm interested in sharing is just going to be blocked. It's going to be a waste of time. So
right.
yeah. um, you can in time find a way of getting most people to listen to you if you want, and often I like, I'm very good at that in the past, and because it's an active vibration in me, I still use it now and again, as I find it very easy to push people's buttons. So, somebody's got a little issue with something, I'll push it and massage it a little bit, and then I'll explain to them what their reaction is and why it's like that from their point of view. Then I'll push it a bit more, and I'll kind of play with it, but I make sure they understand that I'm playing with it and I'm not actually trying to get a rise out of them, and I get a lot of enjoyment out of it, and I'm trying to aggro them. But so yeah, and I find it really helps, and I've seen in my life those people. I had one boss in the Met Police who used to take individuals in meetings and make them walk out crying. These are adults who are there to share information and be in this meeting with this individual, and they would walk out literally crying
Yeah.
and fearful of him. And it was just amazing. I always remember him going to the head of the table, raising the seat, setting the scene before he even walked in. He was doing everything to be powerful. And the
Right.
fascinating thing I found about it is he never, ever, ever, ever tried to do that with me. And I started to realize that I wasn't a vibrational match. There was nothing he could do. There was this void with me. So he didn't even bother trying, and that was fine. So, he and I actually became very good pals, and everybody else hated the guy.
That's funny.
And big pals, but we got along very well. I don't think he was big pals with me. But the amount of times I saw my immediate boss come out of those meetings crying was quite a few. And I was trying to make her, feel a little more detached about the whole process and what they're doing, because he was really helping her. He was really helping her get onto her game, get clear about what she wanted, where she was going, what she wanted to present in the meeting. And the next time you came back, I promise you, each one of those people who ever came back to those meetings came back with far greater clarity than the first time when they walked in. And he got things done and he got clarity out of them. He was, I don't know, I don't think he was ever really terrible to people, but people allowed that to happen to them. He was just very clear. This is what I want. This is what I believe. You don't know what you're talking about. Come back when you know what you're talking about. And he was very, very clear. He knew what he wanted, and he wanted to make sure people came in with the right information, and that was it. He never went out to abuse anybody, but he made it very clear that if they were, not up to par. And yeah, I remember, so many scenarios that I've walked in a meeting room that was really an education for me. But I did see the value to it all, because none of them came back into that room without being very clear. None of them, not one.
It's
And
interesting that
as
you
long as
mentioned
they
that,
learned their
especially
lesson.
yeah, in their lesson. Oh, okay. Well, it's
Yep, their
interesting that you mentioned
lesson.
this
That was what he was trying to do.
I guess, yeah. I mean, in the context also of what
Mm.
Chris wrote, because again, you made reference to the fact that Chris said he or she is slightly on the autism spectrum. It kind of reminded me of a conversation that I had with Daniel and Alex on Thursday, because they are both on the autism spectrum as
Mhm.
well. And one of the things I was asking them had to do with how they respond uh, to large numbers of people, and both of them agreed
Mhm.
that when they're responding to large numbers of people, they can actually shut down. It just becomes too overwhelming to their senses, because an autistic person essentially is somebody whose built-in filtering doesn't work the same way as it does for a quote normal person unquote. Um,
Mhm.
I'm not sure exactly what normal means, but I can tell you what the filtering means. We've talked about this a lot lately. From a physical scientific perspective, it's all about what they call the ARAS, the ascending reticular activating system, which is really just a section of the brain at the brain stem, collection of cells that provides filtering. Cindy Chavez likes to bring it up a lot, and she often says to me, "I never remember the number, Walt. Do you remember the number?" And I always said, "No, I don't remember the number." Well, I went and looked up the number, and the number is actually 11.21 million bits of information per second. That's what all 5 of our senses give to us every single day. Meanwhile, our super duper brains can handle 50 bits per second. So you can kind of tell that that means like 99.999% of the data that comes into our senses, our brains are unable to process. which is kind of scary in some ways.
Well, they do process, so they just filter it out, isn't it?
Well, they filter it. Yes, they filter it so that
Yeah.
I guess I should say the conscious mind can't process it. It's too much for the conscious mind to handle, which I think it's actually kind of helpful. And I know I'm kind of getting away from my comment about autism, but I'll get back to that in a second. I think it's kind of helpful that we have that filtering because it also helps to understand how it is that law of attraction actually works. I mean, if let's say we put a vibration out there to attract X, and we are failing to notice 99.999% of the stuff that comes our way. Well, no wonder we don't get the stuff we're looking for. We're just not filtering properly for it. So we may this is where Abraham's explanation of vibration really helps, but we may be wanting very much to have an ideal relationship come into our lives, but if we're not in the right vibration for it, or to put it another way, if we haven't programmed our ARAS to filter properly for it, when the relationship comes up, we won't see it. It's kind of like the old tale about the visitors to the New World who couldn't be seen on the oceans by the natives because they had never seen ships on the oceans. So it was impossible for them to even see the ships. It's the same basic concept. If you're not programmed to see a great relationship when it pops into your life, you're not going to see it. And I think that really helps to understand why it is law of attraction is such a difficult concept for us, because we miss most of the stuff that shows up. As strange as it is.
But you remember what I was talking about earlier, Walt? I was saying that if you stop judging everything and you just see things as they are, then I think you'd be able to see so much more.
Yes, I agree with that.
Because you now haven't got that whole judgment aspect kicking in at the moment, and you're just perceiving, you're just direct perception of everything that's around you. And you really do, as most people who've heard or followed any spiritual experience or path or group or whatever has started to realize that you kind of have a detachment. You kind of don't judge things so much anymore. And it is part of the process. It is part of how it all works. And it really is interesting because I find myself having conversations over Christmas. It's a time where people get together and they discuss their philosophies of the politics and the current situation and all the rest of it. And I'm sitting there watching all this and just a little bit confused. Like, are you getting so wound up about that? That's somebody's opinion. Let it go. Let them have it. And it's just winding them up something chronic. And you're just sitting there, okay, that's right. And there's an element that somebody will say, you're totally blasé and, you don't care about anything. And, you've got that whole aspect of what people will come up with, but that's not really true. You're actually really caring about alignment. If you want to care about something really intensely in your life, care about alignment, and it'll really help. It makes a huge difference. Your mind's more relaxed. You're not so focused on the negative things. You perceiving things as they are. You're more accepting. I mean, when I got angry the other day about that fine that I got, it was really annoying. I was like right out of whack. I was like totally out of alignment. I was like really getting annoyed. And then my wife just saying, well, look at it from a positive point of view. You're a fast manifester. What was that, a couple of minutes? You're worried about
it's
a fine, you got it.
Yeah, no, it's true. And then tying this back
I just had to laugh. I had to laugh at that and just relax into it. Yeah.
I was just saying that tying this back to the whole thing about the person who's on the autism spectrum, if you're autistic, that filtering doesn't work quite as well. So you're actually getting more data into your conscious mind than your conscious mind can handle, which is why people on the spectrum tend to shut down a bit. It also ties into what Chris wrote, because Chris wrote how Chris says, I often don't understand things that are obvious to others. I usually need things to be spelled out. And I think that's certainly the way Chris sees it. I think I would express the same thing from another perspective. And that is, I prefer to have things spelled out because I attain clarity that way. And it doesn't really matter what other people are doing.
Yep.
Yeah, it's the clarity. It doesn't really matter
looking at it from a slightly different perspective, you can ease it. Mm-hmm. You're looking at it from the perspective Chris came from it's rather brutal. And it's not easing it. So looking at it from a clarity perspective, which is exactly what I thought of while you were saying it as well.
Hmm.
I would be spot on. I'd agree with that 100%. I'd be looking for clarity. If you've got all, as I say, when you're just perceiving it directly, you're perceiving more in my mind than if you're judging it all while you're perceiving it. So you're getting a lot more in, but you're just letting it be. You're just letting it come in and be. And so maybe the challenge with these guys is not that they're getting more input, it's maybe that they're judging it more. I don't know. There's a concept to throw out
Possibly.
for all those brilliant people. Yeah.
I can't say one way or another.
No.
I have even been told by Daniel that he thought maybe I was a bit on the autism spectrum. I have no knowledge about that either way. I couldn't tell you. I'm not sure whether I am or not. But what I will tell you is this: I don't think it matters. I mean, it's quite possible that they're judging it, but the fact is, that's what people often do. They judge. And I would say that if I look at Daniel and Alex, Daniel in particular, especially Daniel, he's not really, in many ways, he's not a judging person. Most of the time he has great perspective on stuff. I mean,
but
I think
that would be his
ability
to deal with that extra input stimuli is by not judging. That would be my conclusion to that. That means he probably handles it particularly well, guessing. But there's another thing Abram brings up, which I think is quite interesting. Abram says that people that are more sensitive have a greater connection with source. So the intense sensitivity allows them to aligned or not aligned, aligned or not aligned, very quickly and very easily because it's very sensitive. And when I told this to a very sensitive individual once, who had spent a huge amount of their life dealing with all this mental sensitivity stuff in degrees and lengths and breadths, which you can't even begin to understand. Although some people who are listening to this who are autistic maybe can. Said to me, these are the words this individual said to me, that's the most beautiful thing anybody has ever said to me.
Yeah.
Because they perceived the truth in it. And I must admit that individual, after that conversation over the years, changed massively. They are able to deal with it 100% better. And it wasn't only that conversation, it was other conversations and their life growing and their own stuff and all the rest of it. It wasn't just what I said, but I perceived a marked improvement after that statement. It was like they had the validation that they were looking for. So I often bring it up to anybody who is super sensitive in certain ways, that their alignment is closer, is greater. But that alignment, because of the contrast aspect, will hurt a lot on the other side, quicker and easier. But the highs will also be quicker and easier.
So basically there are trade-offs whichever way you go. That's essentially what we're saying here. On the one hand, if it comes quickly and easily to make the shift, the trade-off is, on the one hand, you're able to make the shift quickly. You don't have to do a whole lot of messing around like other people do. On the other hand, if you make the shift slowly, you don't have to deal with all the craziness that the people who can do it shortly can do. I mean, it's trade-offs. Which one do you prefer? Which one feels better?
But on the other hand, if you have played a lot on the negative side, the law of attraction is going to expand that, and you're going to feel Louis talking rubbish because I'm so immersed and ingrained in the stuff that I can't get out of it. And when you understand that it's just an accumulation of thought over time, in the what I don't want a direction, then you kind of get it. Kind of like,
that's going to happen regardless. It's going to happen regardless of whether you're in the place of being able to make the quick adjustment or you make a slow adjustment. It's going to be the same result either way. It doesn't make any difference, really.
It does get bigger either way for both of us. Because I don't have that keen sensitivity these guys sometimes have. I'm not in that bandwidth at all.
Well, it's funny,
and it's interesting that
all
they
this
call
stuff
it an
shakes out the
autistic
vibration
scale. This is exactly what I'm talking about now. It breaks down to autistic scale, I'd like the autistic scale to be broken down for me because I didn't really think of it before this conversation as a scale. But what they're kind of
Mhm.
talking about is different vibrational, quantifiable words that they probably put into some kind of system based on the vibration. They probably wouldn't even look at it in terms of vibration, but they would have given them different names, labels in the psychological world.
You got me wondering. I'm going to ask Daniel and Alex about that on Thursday. Do they see the scale as different levels of vibration? I have no idea what they'll say to that.
But what is the scale? I don't even know what an autistic scale is. Or they're just talking
I think
about just
it's
one word, autistic, and then you get very bad and not so bad. Is that the scale they're talking
it's
about?
that's the sense that I have, that there are some people who have great numbers of traits that are associated with autism, and there are other people who have some but a lot fewer than what the more severely autistic people are. I think we, quote, in the normal world, unquote, tend to kind of think about the whole topic in terms of seeing somebody who's severely autistic and how they behave and interact with the world from the outside, what it looks like from the outside, and assume, okay, that's somebody who's severely autistic. And then we see somebody else who seems to behave, quote, normally, unquote, most of the time, and then they exhibit a few characteristics. We say, oh, well, that person is slightly autistic. I think that's the scale that we're talking about. But I'll tell
Okay.
you quite honestly, I think it's a pretty vague scale myself. I think it's a very subjective scale, and I don't think
I'm
it
sure
really tells
somebody
us
would
a
tell
lot.
me I'm autistic too. And who
You also
knows as
mentioned
far as
something else, and
there.
I wanted to bring
Or,
something else up that you
yeah.
mentioned. You mentioned the idea of how do you describe it? Sensitivity of connection to source, or sensitivity of connection to oneself. And I thought that was an interesting idea. Very often we hear people talk about regaining your connection, or you lose your connection and get it back, or something like that, which I've resisted that idea because I don't think it's accurate. I think that we always have the connection. It's just a question of whether we're paying
Yeah,
attention
you
to
always
it.
have the connection. You're completely correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's our
But the
perception or
sensitivity
our
to it.
belief if we're connected to it or not.
Yeah, yeah,
So the way
exactly.
Abram puts it is this: if you are a very sensitive person, you have a strong connection to source. Those are the words.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that, because essentially what they're saying is,
Yeah.
if you have a sensitivity, it means in some way you are able to detect changes, shifts, variations in your own vibration, in whatever you're receiving from your inner being, in what you're receiving through your senses from other people or from other events and circumstances. And that sensitivity is just a way of saying you're noticing a whole lot more. Well, if you're noticing more, I think it's fair to say, yeah, you're more connected. It's a stronger connection, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense. So
But somebody who's very
here's to all the
sensitive
sensitive
and
people.
looked at it as socially wrong in some shape or form, and can't handle big crowds of people, etc. When you tell them that you actually have a strong connection to source, it can actually validate some kind of understanding of where they are and how it's perceived. And
Well, there's also a couple ways to look at the
because
word
they do.
sensitive.
Hmm.
I mean, one of the ways we can look
Mhm.
at sensitive is just in terms of like this autistic spectrum idea. But we can also look at sensitivity in terms of like what you were talking about before, people who respond to opinions of others and they get worked up about them. Well, that's a form of sensitivity. It's a different kind in the sense that the
Yeah.
person who is being affected, allowing themselves to be affected by someone else's opinions, is basically kind of giving up some of their own power, but it's still a form of sensitivity. It's different
Hmm.
than the other kind. And I think it would be fair to say almost everybody is sensitive one way or another. It's just a question of what form of sensitivity are we talking about. At least that's the way I would see it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're pointing out every subject's two subjects, taking sensitivity and it's focused on what you want and what you don't want about it.
Mhm.
Breaking that down. I don't know, maybe not. Yeah.
Well, partly that, but also I think I challenge the idea that there are people who are not sensitive. I think that the most we can ever say is they cut themselves off from it by not giving their attention to whatever the it is. In this case, it's some form of sensitivity to oneself or to others or whatever. But it's a cutoff. Maybe they didn't consciously intend to cut off, but they cut off in some way. And the cutoff means it means simply I'm not paying more attention. I'm paying less attention. And the less attention that I pay, then the more quote insensitive unquote I seem. But it's not really insensitive. It's just not paying attention. It's just I refuse to give my attention to that thing, and I'm not going to bring more of it into my life. I may not understand how law of attraction works, but that's what I'm doing. I'm just doing it because that's what I do. You know, so is that mean that that person doesn't have a strong connection to source? Not necessarily. Does it mean that that person doesn't have a strong sensitivity to others? Not necessarily. It just means they're not paying attention. I mean, paying attention is a conscious choice that we make for a variety of reasons.
Paying attention means awareness.
Yeah. I think about the fact that this also comes out of a response that I gave to Chris when I first wrote back to her about this email, because I also gave her some stuff about this email. Him or her, I keep saying her, but I don't know it's a her. Forgive me, Chris, if I got it wrong. But there's a particular test that was done by physicists who essentially wanted to challenge what people like you and me talk about, the role of consciousness. Particularly, they were trying to address it in the context of quantum mechanics, quantum physics, because one of the concepts that those of us who talk from a spiritual perspective often drag out of quantum mechanics is the observer phenomenon. That when an observer is looking at an event, it will produce a different result from when an observer is not looking at the event. And the way that the experimenter attempted to counter the role of the observer as spiritual type people like us draw it out is they said, we're going to make an experiment where the observer is an electronic device. And the electronic device is through some random function is going to make the observation and therefore make the determination about what happens. And if such an observer effect happens, then it proves that consciousness doesn't have to be a part of it. And so they performed the experiment, got the result they were looking for, and they said, see, this proves it doesn't have to be a conscious observer. It just has to be the presence of something. And I laughed when I first read that. I laughed because I thought to myself, boy, this really shows the axioms, the assumptions that scientists work by and live by. One of the most common ones being that the only conscious beings in our universe are humans. They sometimes might be willing to give some degree of credit for minor amounts of consciousness to certain mammals under certain circumstances, but that's about it. That's about as far as their idea of consciousness goes. And so if you accept their axiom, their assumption that that's all there is in terms of consciousness, then, well, their experiment is validated. Thing is, I don't accept that axiom. I think consciousness is in everything. I think it's in every human, in every animal, every insect, every rock, every tree.
Atom.
It's everywhere, And once you realize that, then you can put anything in there you want as an observer, and there's consciousness involved. So it pretty much ruins the experiment.
And from my perspective, every smallest particle known to man and smaller and whatever is out there, every single one of them has the knowledge of the whole, has the awareness of the whole.
Yeah. That's something science is just beginning to develop.
To me,
too.
God is in everything. Source is in everything. Source doesn't exist outside any physical particle in any shape or form. And the whole is in the individual part of that.
So when I tie
It's
this
like
back
the
to what we were
acorn
talking about.
Can be a tree.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So when I tie this back to what we were talking about earlier about the connectedness, that some people are more connected, or some people have a stronger or more sensitive connection, others have a weaker connection. To me, that's the same thing as saying, only humans have the consciousness. The others, there might be some other consciousness in other places, but there's not so much. And I think to myself, nah, that doesn't make sense. There's consciousness everywhere. That means wherever you have consciousness, you have awareness. Wherever you have awareness, that's it. You have awareness. And now it's just a question of where's the consciousness that
I
we're
mean,
talking about giving the awareness to.
Abram often points out that animals have a greater connection to source, and that's why they can really be of benefit to us. So they, oh, sorry, just give me a sec. I've got the YouTube running here, and I was wondering where that sound was coming from. It's going to my other
That's all right.
speakers. And so where was I? I've got distracted totally there.
I'm not sure where you were going, so I can't really help you a whole lot. You were talking about what Abraham says about animals being more sensitive than humans.
Oh yeah. Animals have a high level of alignment. So, you know, you're stroking a cat and all the rest of it, and you feel good around them, or dogs, or whatever animals you've got, horses, or so they don't focus on their minds negatively a lot of the time. There is a level of it, but it's minute compared to a human. So they're more in the present, in the now, you know, in balance. So we can gain a huge amount by looking at them, watching them, aligning with them, being with them, appreciating them, appreciating nature, appreciating grass, trees, wind, air, you know, whatever. So yeah, I can understand why my sister, for example, who's very, very big into nature, you know, she thinks everything's nature. Nature's the answer to everything. And, you know, it's just like been like this for centuries, for as long as I've known her, centuries.
How long have you known her, Louis?
So, yeah, don't judge me from this lifetime alone. Yeah.
I love it.
So, you know, there are those who really get it about nature and animals and all the rest of it. And there's people like me that don't really get it too much, because until I was told this by Abram and I started working it out for myself, I didn't get what these people saw in this. I didn't realize that they were looking at a greater level of alignment than a lot of other humans around them. So it kind of was like an eye opener for me. Oh, that's what they're getting at. That's what they're getting at. So I was really, really chuffed when that penny dropped and I kind of got that. And now I admire nature and animals to a far greater degree than I ever did, which has been very beneficial to me, and is probably what allowed a cat to come live in our house, which we don't have to look after.
Right.
and just appreciate, enjoy, and gets fed next door and goes and poos next door. So, you know, I just love it. It's just such a cool arrangement. And it's been going on now for months and months and months. So
talk about attracting exactly what you wanted. That's really great.
Yeah, I mean, beneficial for the neighbors because, you know, their cats don't get along with this cat. You know, at least the cat is living somewhere else and he's happy and has got a nice environment, and, you know,
Yep.
and we're enjoying it. And the family, I mean, the kids always wanted an animal. So, you know, there were so many pluses of the universal law of attraction turned out and made this happen. I was just really impressed. It's like, I would never have dreamt of that in a million years. I would have thought we had to go out and get our own cat or whatever,
Right.
and feed it, and, you know, and all the rest of it. But
one other thing I wanted to make
happen.
a point about autism, because we mentioned the autism spectrum before, and Chris said that Chris is on the spectrum, and then Daniel and Alex are. The observation that I've made about people I know on the autism spectrum, and about what little I do know about what it's like to be autistic, is that the people, and I won't say it's just people, I suspect it's also animals and other conscious beings as well, conscious beings who essentially choose to come into this life to experience an autistic experience, are in some ways going to the gym. I've talked about that analogy before, about you go to the mental gym to kind of work your LOA muscles, to work your ability to focus on what you want to focus on, take your mind off what you don't want to focus on, all that kind of thing. And who can say that they've had to do that more diligently than an autistic person, because they don't have the built-in filtering that I've got. So they have to kind of compensate for it, and they have to really apply themselves to focus, and they do. That's what's so interesting and amazing to me. Autistic people are able to focus to degrees well beyond what I can. And I
Mm.
suspect what is also true for many other people. I'll give you an example. There's a movie that came out a few years ago called Temple Grandin about a young woman named Temple Grandin who is autistic. And the movie did a wonderful job of demonstrating, presenting, showing what it's like to be autistic within the world. And the example
Mhm.
that always comes to my mind is when Temple was like a young teenage girl, she went to her uncle's, cousins, a relative's farm, a ranch to live for a summer. And they show a scene where, you know how on ranches in the US they have these gates, they're often called cattle gates, and
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
like and you have I don't know how to describe it. You got the grooved section that
The
a
grid,
hoofed animal can't go
yeah,
over.
the
It's like a
grill.
grid there. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a grill. Yeah, and it just blocks them. They don't want to go out, right? So that's why they have it built that way. And the gate is how you get into the ranch. Well, they showed in the movie the gate opening, and as the gate is opening, they have it displayed like a schematic diagram with the angles of the gate and how far the gate is open. And as the angles are changing, the numbers of the angles, the number of degrees are shifting as the gate is opening. That's giving you the idea of what the autistic person is seeing when they're seeing the gate opening. I'm saying to myself, oh my God, when I see a gate open, I just see a gate open. When they see a gate open, they see, what the angle of opening is every step of the way. They can calculate it instantly in their mind. And oh my, I have nowhere near that level of focus that they have.
I'll
So,
give you a good example, Walt. I'm playing an online first-person shooter at the moment. All those guys out there.
okay.
Can you believe I actually play first-person shooters? Okay,
When
so
you
there's
first
this
told me
guy
that,
I'm
I was a little
playing, and
surprised, but whatever.
yeah. So there's Discord. I don't know if you know what Discord is, but it's an audio
Yes,
app that you can talk while you play. So on
right.
Discord, I'm chatting to this guy who I've become friends with. He's a Swedish guy. He's a nice guy. And he tells me he's found out eventually after many years that he's autistic. And I'm busy playing there shooting, and he's telling me there's a guy coming from your left. There's a guy. Now he's got his own game and his own thing, but he's telling me what's happening to me. And I'm
Right,
like going, how do you see what's happening in my game? I
right.
know we're on the same team and all the rest of it, but he knows exactly where I am, where all the different players are, which characters they are, what their strengths and weaknesses are. And it's just like, how do you get all that information? It's just so impressive. I'm just sitting there gobsmacked.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the same feeling that I had with the Temple Grandin movie. So, I mean, I know that there's still some stigma associated with autism. I guess this is my way of saying throw the stigma out, folks. I think the autistic people have the advantage. They've got the drop on us. We're the ones who are
Yeah, I
now trying to catch
mean,
up.
I think that's very true, and I think a lot of people came into this life with ADHD and all other things to say, I'm not going to let anybody control me. I'm not
Yeah.
going to let what you think or believe have any effect on me. And I've learned that over the years to cut out everybody else's belief, etc. But these guys are born into it. They come in saying, I don't agree on like anything that you're saying, and that's it. Game over. I don't
Hmm.
care. I will fight. I will kill. I'll do anything, but I'm not interested in what you say. And it's brilliant. I think the power and the usefulness of that is indeterminable because, as somebody put it, the adults aren't very good at dispensing very good advice. The things that they generally only say to kids
Yeah.
is of what they shouldn't do and things that went wrong in their lives and what they shouldn't do, not how
Right.
the world works, how LA works, what the life is, how to use it, how to focus on what you want, where to go, how to manifest what you want. None of that is taught. It's usually the advice parents give is, you know, don't buy insurance. It's a rip-off, or don't do this, don't do that, don't do the other. Don't swear, don't this, don't that. It's just goes on and on and on and on. And it's just a bunch of things that they've learned along the way that trip them up, and that's what they're sharing. And it's of very little value, very little value, I believe. When you're teaching them, how the universe works, how to manifest what they want, and go out and make your own mistakes and do all the swearing and all the other things that you need to do, but at least you've got an idea of which way to go and how to use the tools, all the rest of it, and go play your own game, and standing back, watching your kid make their own mistakes, which I've done in numerous occasions, much to other parents and my wife and other people's horror. Until my wife got used to who I was and why I was doing it to a great level of clarity. She was not particularly happy
It's
either,
understandable.
but yeah, it is understandable. I don't really have any problem with it, but I'm just appreciative that I have somebody in my life who is prepared to spend the time to see why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Absolutely. In fact, I would even
Because
add to it that it's a wonderful thing when we let kids do their own thing and fail to their own failures. It's not something that
yeah, I mean, I've let
parents
my
like
child
doing that.
yeah themselves in quite awkward situations, which they have suffered from temporarily. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's the point. It's temporary. It doesn't last permanently.
Exact. Well, death is temporary too.
True. I think back to what
Yeah.
I used to explain to parents who were considering bringing their children into that alternative school that I helped to found, the Sudbury Model School. And what I would explain to them is this: if whatever it is that the child is about to do puts them at imminent risk of serious injury or death, yes, intervene, whatever way you have to, grab them by the
Yes.
throat.
And you
It
can
doesn't
step in.
matter.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But if that's not there,
You pull them out
what
of
are
the
you
road if
doing?
the car's coming hurtling down.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is a no-brainer. This doesn't take a whole lot of time to figure out. You don't have to do an entire
No,
moral
it doesn't.
matrix to figure out what's going on here. But absent something like that, what are you
But
doing?
a burn on the stove or something like that, it can be a great lesson. You can tell them, don't touch
Yeah,
the
they're
stove,
not
don't
going to
touch
do
the
that one
stove. Or
again.
you can let them touch them once, burn themselves, have it
It's
heal, and
done.
then, they'll know, it's
Yeah.
done.
You don't
As
actually
Abram
have to be
puts it, you
taught that
can
once. Like,
go and
oh, that hurt.
you can go and take a child and take them into nice warm water and very shallow and let them paddle around in that. And you can take them a little deeper, after 20 or 30 sessions, then you can take them a little deeper. Then you can get them to kick a little bit, and then you can take them, and et cetera, et cetera. You get the idea. Or you can push them in the deep end.
Well, I'm not sure I would push them
Or-
into the deep end. I would not object to them heading toward the deep end, but I don't think I'd push them in there. That's two different things, really.
Well, I would push them in because I'm very, very confident, specifically in water. And I remember taking my 6-month-old baby and pushing them to the bottom of the deep end, watching them come up to the surface with this big smile on their face. But I've got the confidence. There was this parent who was watching me do that, and they said, I could never do that. And I said, then don't. I can
Yes,
take
right.
your child and probably do it, but you can't do it with your child. You must understand the difference. Yeah. I have the
Well, for me,
belief. You don't.
there's also another factor, though. And the factor that I think about is, do I want to interfere with another person's compass? I mean, if it were an adult, the last thing I would think of to do is to push an adult into the water. So why would I push a child into the water? That's the way I look at it. I want
Well,
to
the
think
thing
about
is,
it
a
in terms
child's
of,
been
well, wait a minute, wait a minute,
in
wait a
water
minute.
for.
Wait just a second. I want to explain what I'm talking about here.
Sure.
The person who is pushed into something is not the same thing as the person who chooses to do something. And I think that when we push somebody, adult or child, doesn't really matter what we're talking about. What we're really saying is, I don't trust you to investigate the thing that I think you should investigate. Whereas I think the better position is to say, I do trust you. I trust the fact that you have this, I call it a built-in compass, call it whatever you want, a built-in guidance system that allows you to go where you need to go most, to do what you need to do most in order to learn what you most need to learn, and to do it in the time frame that you need to learn it. So from my perspective, I think, why would I want to interfere in anyone else's choices? I may not have made the same choices myself, but to me, it's the height of hubris for me to claim that I know for you what it is you should be studying. And if I'm not going to do that with an adult, why would I do that with a kid? That's the way I look at it. So there's my fuller explanation.
No, I get exactly what you're saying, and I don't disagree with any of it. I think the way Abram put it in the the audio that I listened to was, there was a bunch of kids playing on the side of the pool, and one bumped the other one into the deep end, and they learned to swim very quickly and got to the side, and realized that they could do it and had confidence. And then,
Sure.
so you pushed, yeah, it's just a way of getting across the idea of shortening the time frame of learning to swim, which is what Abram said. It doesn't really matter. Both the kids can swim in the end of the day. That's it.
That's pretty much
And
it.
it was interesting. It's true. That is it. Both of the kids can swim.
It's one of the
One
lessons
just
that I
took a bit
learned from
longer than the
the
other. That's it.
from the Sudbury Model School. It was one of the biggest lessons that I learned, that if you have a school where kids literally have the choice about what they're going to do, when they're going to do it, including every aspect of what would traditionally be called schooling, and you basically just let them do whatever throughout their entire day, every single day, 5 days a week or 7 days a week, or however you want to look at it, by the time that they're 12 years old, they'll all know how to read. Even though you didn't put them in a reading class.
Exactly.
Even though you didn't do
Exactly.
anything to push it on, they'll still know how to read, every one of them. And that's
Because
really
I
kind
wanna
of a
make this
mind-breaking
plane.
concept.
Ooh,
Yeah,
I wonder how to make this plane. Oh, there's a diagram on the internet. Oh, I need to print it off. Okay, and now I've got it, but I don't understand the words. What does this mean? What does that mean? How does that work? Oh,
exactly.
yeah. And so you put it together because you want to. I'm watching my
Precisely.
daughter. So my older daughter was not interested at all. She would memorize these books we'd take to bed with us, and then she'd read them off, and we all thought she was reading, but she wasn't. She was memorizing them. So then my new younger one, my 5-year-old now, is doing the ta ta wa, and all the different letters, stringing them together and making words, and writing cat just from working it out. And my older daughter was not like that at all. Okay.
Right.
But my younger one is completely doing it the official way. And
The official way, right?
neither is wrong. Both of them. Yeah, that's the way the school would like you to learn it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true.
And in the end of the day, both of them will be able to read and write, and it doesn't really matter which method they use to get there. And
not really.
I don't think kids should go to school until 12 years old, personally. I think they should
get the reading done, then go to school.
12 years old. Yeah.
Okay. I'd say that'd be a definite.
I think they'll
improvement
pick
over
up
the current
reading
system.
in absolutely no time once they're 12. I think they will be able to,
Oh,
but
yeah.
they've had 12 years of playing, of just being spontaneous, of creative, happy, No, that's my take on education.
Well, speaking of play, because I gotta pick up on your cue there. I don't know if you meant to give it or not, but speaking of play, I want to encourage people to play with the LOA Today app, because among other things, it gives you the opportunity to do what Chris did, which was Chris sent in an email, and look what we did with it. We turned it into an entire show. You could use it to simply ask a question for us to address. You can use it to bring up some points like Chris did, but use the app, because one of the reasons we have that app is the ask a question form. And you can ask a question of any of my co-hosts or myself, and we will include it in the show. So take advantage of that. And then, by the way, you can also listen to the episodes. If you don't want to listen to it through your favorite podcast player, listen to it through the Elevate Today app. But whatever you do, get the app and make sure you share it with others so that other people can do the same thing, because we want more and more people to ask those questions. And Louis, this has been good. We're looking forward to getting Amy back next week, but I think we've proven once again we can hold our own without her.
Yeah, we look forward to having her back next week.
Absolutely, no doubt about it. So thank you very much. Thank you to our live streamers, and especially thank you to our podcast listeners. We will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.